Hello and welcome to another episode of Wholala. Now, my name's Sam, and unfortunately, as you may have known from the Christmas special, these cheeky goblins have been running around and they've managed to nab Alasdair from earlier in his time stream and turn him into baby butter for baby scones. So I'm afraid he's not joining me and I've had to get another co-host. So today, I am joined by the incomparable Josh Whips of Doctor Experience fame. Josh, hello!
Hello!
How are you doing, Josh?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Excited to be on the podcast?
I'm buzzing for it.
What's weird, so normally me and Alasdair do podcasts over Zoom every so often, doing in-person ones. When you have like an in-person guest, as Josh is right now, we've got one microphone, we're kind of like ping-ponging between us.
I feel like I'm being interviewed on like BBC News or something.
Except we're fully like in a bedroom, just like sat on a bed ready to talk about a very specific episode of 2014 Doctor Who.
Just sipping on some white wine after watching that.
Oh yeah, we've had a couple glasses. I'm actually going to have a little sip while I ask you, Josh. Josh, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. We've just come off the back of watching this episode and I'm very much in my like headspace of 10 years ago. No, hold on, that sounds dreadful. I'm not sure anyone wants to be in the headspace of
10 years ago,
an 18-year-old.
I know what you mean though. It's suddenly like watching this episode, I felt very like transported back to 2014. I was like, oh yeah, this was Doctor Who at the time, like, you know.
If I close my eyes, I can see the hashtag. What was the hashtag they used for like? It was when the leaks happened, and they were like hashtag keep me spoiler free.
Oh yeah. Oh, this was one of the episodes where the script was leaked.
Yeah. And it was also the world tour, and when Jenna made her Twitter account. Like, if I close my eyes, I'm back there. I remember it very well.
Oh my God. Well, everyone listening to the podcast, Josh is actually probably more qualified to host this podcast than I am. Now, he has been involved in Doctor Who. This is common knowledge for the podcast that I, Doctor Who fan from 2005 onwards, solid. And then I very much like fell off for a few years and came back hard. I think it's fair to say you never fell off.
Yeah, no, you're right. I've always made effort to watch every single episode live, all the way back from 2005 Rose. I remember at one point I was very close to dipping out after, classic story, everyone had it, End of Time Part 2. I was like, that's it, I'm done, I'm finished with this show. Do you remember back in the day when you'd go on Facebook and you'd like 200 pages on your newsfeed and then be like, that's it, that's my time on Facebook.
Yeah.
I'd liked about 100 different groups of like, Matt Smith's ruined Doctor Who. My guy had like 20 seconds on screen just like running around replacing David Tennant, and I just decided in that moment that I'm like, no one can replace David Tennant, hashtag not my Doctor. And then I remember watching the 11th Hour just out of like spite. I was like, no, I've got to watch this and realise how bad he is.
And then by the end of the episode, you were like...
Not even the end of the episode. Like, it was when he literally just got out the TARDIS in Amelia's garden, walked into the tree, and I had a smirk on my face. And I was like, oh, I like this guy.
I was like that with David Tennant. I remember when Christopher Eccleston regenerated, and I was like, who's this man in his leather suit? I don't know him. We don't know her. I don't like him. And then by the time he was like, do you miss me? I was like... I did miss you, David. I really did. I was swayed real quick.
I don't think there was another point where I nearly dropped off. Like, I just think this show is the best thing and the worst thing on television.
It really is.
Here's me sat on a Doctor Who podcast. I'm like, yeah, I think this show's shit. But I think that's the joy. And I think so much like discourse and so much like online arguments and stuff are just like, oh, this showrunner's this and this showrunner's that. And I'm just sort of like, the show is ridiculous. This show is so silly, so joyous. I feel like it's always going to be there. And people are like, oh, this, the ratings of this, the ratings of that. I'm like, it's always going to be on. It's always going to like, there'll be Doctor Who in any kind of capacity of some sort. I know I'm sort of saying that as someone that's been like, oh, I wasn't around when the show got cancelled in the 80s. But I'm just sort of like, it's fine. It came back, had a movie. Like, it'll always be there in some form.
This is what I think. Like, even if Doctor Who was to go on a hiatus, say after Shooty's era or the Doctor after Shooty, like Doctor Who, I don't think will always be on TV every single year. But I think in some capacity, it will always come back. It's always going to be here. What's your relationship with the show then? Because me and Josh met. This is really weird to think about. We've known each other for less than a year, which is wild for me to think about. We met at Gallifrey Cabaret in March 2023. But you were already listening to the podcast, I think, at that point, weren't you?
I was, yeah. Don't ask me what the first episode was or how I found out about it, but I was listening.
Josh was actually, so Beth Axford, who wrote the unofficial Doctor Who quiz book, who was also the first ever guest we ever had on Wholala, was on the podcast because you introduced us, because you already knew Beth and you introduced us.
I was so drunk that night. I can't remember anything. Oh no.
Me too. It's all good. No, I remember Beth coming up to me and being like, "Oh, I love Hula. Like I see it online, and I was introduced through my housemate Josh, and then I saw you, and you were like, hi,
That's me.
there's you." But what has your relationship been like with the show?
So obviously, like I said, like I was 8 years old when 2005 when it came back. I was hooked on it. I had same sort of kind of generic everything growing up with it. So like, I had the action figures, I had the, oh my God, I had the,
The what?
I had this video that I showed Sam a couple of weeks ago of, I had like a YouTube channel and it is going to stay private. It's going to stay hidden because I swear to God, if this gets out.
But it's so good.
It's so bad. It's so bad that it's good.
Like everyone of our age had a YouTube channel at one point.
Everyone wanted to be a YouTuber or a YouTuber in 2008. And like I had like my like terrible quality webcam in 2008, 2009, where like I had my Face of Bo action figure with movable mouth, which I bought from either Woolworths or Wilco, rest in peace. And like I had the Face of Bo lip dub to, what was it? It was like Take That, Rule the World, I think it was.
I think so, yeah.
I had like
so good.
Martha action figure doing like handstands. I had like, it was like Doctor Who. No, it was going to say it was Doctor Who Britain's Got Talent. It wasn't. It was called like the Exterminate Factor or something. I don't know. 2008 was a different time.
It was a wild time.
So like we're talking that level of fan. Like I had the Battles in Time cards. I had the Nintendo DS Top Trumps game.
See, I never had that. I had all the Top Trumps. I actually have a set of the original 2006 Top Trumps here. The physical one
God.
Somewhere. I'll take those out after we recorded. I never had the Wii. You mean the Wii game one, or
No. It was the DS one.
oh shit! But with the Dr. Martha, that one.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
know the one.
Was there a Wii game?
I know the exact same one they did on DS and Wii because they're both Nintendo.
Oh, I feel like just Doctor Who does not have a good relationship with video games. Apart from the adventure games.
I was going to say, I'll give you the adventure games. Those are actually stellar. Those are so good. But you've sort of, I always say this, I mean, we're going to dip into the episode we're talking about, I promise, very, very soon. But I always say this with you. You're always like 1 degree of separation away from Doctor Who. Like you've had so many like touches with the show. Like
there's just so many, with me, there's so many stupid stories that like, people just like, when people listen to my stories, they're just sort of sitting there and it's like, of course that happened to you. Of course that did.
it was like you've lived 1,000 lives.
Well, like when I was 19, like I left my parents' house and I moved to Cardiff and I started working at the Doctor Who Experience. And then that was also when Class was filming. And that was also when series 10 of Doctor Who started filming. And like, just Cardiff isn't as big as a city as you think it is. And just the weird, like you say, degree of separation that I was from the show. Like one of the coolest pieces of things that I own comes from a Secret Santa that I had when I worked at the Doctor Who Experience, where I have a framed, like, do you remember at the launch of Series 9, they had like the Abbey Road, Jenna Coleman and Peter Capaldi and the Daleks crossing the zebra crossing. I had that as like a proper poster signed by Peter Capaldi to me with little Dalek doodles and stuff on it.
Why? Oh, I'm yet to see this in person. I have seen a picture of it. It's crazy.
Honestly, it's sick. And I've had it framed in like every single bedroom that I've lived in since then. Like I love that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the sort of the weird degree of separation I've had with Doctor Who. Like it's, like I said, like, living in Cardiff is just that in itself. But like, no, I feel like there's, I still don't even think I've told you half the silly little Doctor Who stories that are my life.
We keep talking about how we're going to go on a road trip of Cardiff, and I'm sure this is where all of this stuff is going to come out. We're going to get it come out. Well, I do know that you have ties to the episode we're talking about today. If, dear listener, you've not heard from the episode title, we're talking about the 2014 classic Time Heist, which was one I was speaking to Josh a couple weeks ago. I was like, oh, we were saying you're going to come on the podcast, and I was like, oh, what do you want to do for your episode? And you gave me like a list of like 30. You're like, okay, what haven't you done? I was like, oh, I can't even remember at this point. So then you made a list of the ones I'd done, which I thought was so impressive. And then you're like, okay, well, I love this one, I love this one, I love this one. And on this list was Time Heist. And I was like, oh, we need to do Time Heist.
We do need to do Time Heist. Also, sorry, the way that you just called this a 2014 classic also makes me sick, also makes me giggle. Like 2014
was the other day.
2014 was like, I remember it like it was, maybe not yesterday, but like that still feels pretty current to me. Like,
to me, my brain goes like, okay, so right now it's 2022. But last year it's 2018, so 2 years ago 2016. So I think 2014 was 3 years ago. Like that's my maths, you know?
Yeah. Odd years don't exist. You're right.
Literally. And I skip over 2020 for obvious reasons.
Valid.
Yeah. But what made you? Because it was really. I think I was the one that was like, we have to do Time Heist. But why was that one of the ones you sent over?
Jenna Coleman in a sexy suit, obviously.
That's a valid reason. Valid.
No, I don't know. I think I knew deep down, I was just like, listen, if I'm on it just to talk about one thing, it's got to have to be 12 Clara. Like, they are, without a shadow of a doubt, my favourite Doctor and my favourite companion, which is the funniest thing, because at the time of watching, I wouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
But I think just as time's gone on, I just think the two of them,
Chef kiss.
Chef's kiss. I think that no one even comes close to them two. Like, watching it live would have been like, oh, David Tennant and Catherine Tate, and like, obviously love the two of them. Love, I love every single companion, every single Doctor of various different things, but these two, just, there's something about it. Like, those who get it. Those who don't, I feel sorry for.
No, I get you. I feel like this was the beginning of the intermediate end for me, where I was like about to start falling off the show, where I don't know, I feel like I was also like a little bit made to be like, okay, Doctor Who's like for kids and you grow up and whatever. And I feel like Peter's era was really the like start of that nail being hammered into the coffin. And I just remember not really connecting with it. My memory of this series 8 is watching the Mummy on the Orient Express and being like, oh, this is the first one I've properly enjoyed. Like, I remember watching that and being like, I really like that. And this one I just remember being a bit like, oh, I don't know, it was fine. I enjoyed it a lot more on this rewatch. So a little context for anyone who's not seen the episode in a while. The episode came out on the 20th of September 2014 to a viewership of 6.99 million. And it currently has an IMDb score of 7.8 out of 10, which is a very like respectable score as Doctor episodes go,
I don't know how other episodes of that series rank, but that sounds pretty solid.
I can tell you how other episodes of this rank. So me and Alice have put a lot of planning into this podcast, and we have a little tracker with every episode and their IMDb score. So looking at this series, we've got Deep Breath of 7.8, Into the Dalek 7.6, Robot of Sherwood 6.9. I'll go through. We've got 8.8, 7.9, 7.2, 6.7, 8.4, 8.3, 6.1, 8.5, 7.8. So the high of the season is 8.8 with Listen.
Interesting.
Not how you'd rank them?
Not at all. I'm sorry, I'm looking at this. In the Throes of the Night deserves better.
Yeah.
Mummy on the Orient Express is, like you said, you absolutely love that. I don't I think it's a good episode.
I don't know how I'd feel. I have watched it fairly recently, but like, I haven't watched the whole series as a whole recently.
The Caretaker on 7.2. Nah.
We don't agree with this.
Nah.
We don't agree with
Sorry,
this.
IMDb users.
I don't agree with.
Not
I don't
agree,
IMDb
not-
agree with you. Well, look, this is why you know who's on the podcast. You know who's not on here. IMDb.
Preach and say that again.
Say that again. Well, look. So I, truth be told, had not seen this episode since original broadcast. I know this is actually going to be gaggy for people who listen to this. But so basically, with my relation to Doctor Who, I came back onto it in a real hard way when Russell was announced back. And that has no comment on who the showrunners were at the time or anything like that. It was just where I was in my life. And my pure nostalgia for the RTD era sort of jumped me back in. And when we started Wholala, I made quite a conscious decision to not watch any episode of Doctor Who that I hadn't rewatched. So I was rewatching, Russell's era and some Stephen Moffat episodes that I'd seen a lot. But I anything that I hadn't seen in a while, I was like, I'm not going to rewatch because I want fresh eyes for it for the podcast. This is one of those times. I have not seen this episode since original broadcast. Josh and I have just watched it. And I have thoughts. So for anyone else who's not seen it in a while, again, my advice is always just go to iPlayer, go and watch it. But if you haven't seen it in a while, here's a little recap of the episode.
In Clara's flat, the 12th Doctor answers the TARDIS's phone. and both are surprised to find themselves in a room with two others, Sai, a hacker with an augmented brain, and Sabra, a mutant shapeshifter. A recording including messages from each agreeing to a short-term memory wipe before getting instructions from the architect to break into the Bank of Karabraxos and steal 3 items from its vault.
The head of bank security, Mrs. Delphox, uses a telepathic alien called the Teller to detect those with criminal intent and destroy their brains. The Doctor believes the memory wipes were needed to avoid being caught. Within, the Doctor, Clara, Sabra and Sai find 6 devices left by the architect that appear to be atomic shredders, to be used if they are caught to die quickly and painlessly. Both Sabra and Sai sacrifice themselves with shredders when they encounter the Teller, allowing the Doctor and Clara to reach the vault door.
The door appears impossible to open, but then a solar storm strikes the planet's surface, triggering an automatic unlocking sequence. The Doctor realises that this was a time travel heist. They recover 2 items, a serum to stabilise Sabra's DNA and a circuit to restore Sai's long-term memories. The Doctor and Clara are captured and brought to Delphox's office. The guards reveal themselves to be Sai and Sabra. The shredders are actually short-range teleports to an escape ship in orbit. The storm threatens to destroy the bank, but the Doctor wants to uncover the 3rd item.
They meet the bank's director, Madame Karabraxos, in a private vault. Karabraxos directs Mrs. Delphox, who is the latest of one of her clones, to have the Teller brought to her vault before having Delphox incinerated for letting Karabraxos down. Before Karabraxos departs, the Doctor gives her the TARDIS's phone number to use when she has a moment of regret. When the Teller arrives, the Doctor lets it restore his short-term memory. The call to the TARDIS was an act from the dying Karabraxos regretting something she left in the vault. The Doctor became the architect of the Time Heist to assemble Sabra and Sai to plant the teleports to get him to this point. The Doctor shows them why they had 6 teleports. Karabraxos wanted him to rescue the Teller's mate that she had locked up in force of the Teller's corporation. The Teller then frees its mate, and the 2, the last of their kind, are evacuated to an unpopulated planet to live their lives in peace.
Oh,
Isn't that cute?
it's a love story.
It really is. I think that's so cute. It ends very, very cute. But before we get into your thoughts and mine, we did reach out to you on X, the app formerly known as Twitter, to see what your thoughts were, dear listener, and here's what some of you had to say. At Begin Again Fan said, it's a classic heist story with Clara and Peter, so I loved it.
At the 3rd JP says, an underrated banger, and Sai and Sabra should have been recurring characters in 12's era.
I think that's valid. I think there's a lot of companions that could have been, and they definitely fall in that category.
I completely agree. I remember back in 2015, just after Last Christmas aired, this was me in my silly tomfoolery era where I didn't realise how good Clara Oswald was as a companion. It's like, oh, Clara should have left after Last Christmas. And I was like, we should have brought back Sai and Sabra. I mean, why not add them to the list? You know, Team Not Dead in Series 9. Could have been.
Could have been, honestly. At Straddy Hoover says, it's the movie of the week format Series 7 was going for, done absolute justice. Stylish, full of ideas, just lots of fun.
Preach. Say it again.
It's the movie of the week's format.
No. Ethan says, this episode was made for the bisexuals. Jenna Coleman in that... Oh my God, you're so right. Jenna Coleman in that suit along with Jonathan Bailey is just chef's kiss. That aside, it's probably one of my favourite Series 8 stories. The premise is very clever and the supporting characters are very likeable with interesting motives.
It truly is made for the bisexuals.
But the costume designers knew what they were doing when they put Jenna Coleman in that suit. Like, my lord.
It's hard.
Beg your pardon?
You know what I said. Yeah, I saw that. Oh my God. At IPT1231 says, I like Time Heist and I always say this, but I always imagine the writers and actors were playing a Doctor Who tabletop RPG and it turned one of the sessions into an episode.
At Dennis Guild 10 says, loved the heist setup, especially loved the cameos of such criminals as the Slovene, John Hart, and even the Trickster.
I forgot about that. I completely... So much of my memory of this episode is gone. And I completely forgot about that scene. It was so fun when I was watching it. And I love that it's specifically, it's not like a promo picture for Slovene. It's like a picture from when it was inside Downing Street. I was like, who took that photo?
Well, I think the people that they chose for it, like, because obviously like the context of that is Sai is trying to get the Teller to be like, oh my God, all the worst criminals in the galaxy are here. Lol, let's go and whatever I do.
Yeah. Let's go and tell.
Let's go tell. Excuse me, miss.
I'm telling. Well, I did save this for my fun facts, but I'll pick it out now because it's relevant. So when Sai tries to lure the head away from Clara, visualizing some of the galaxy's most notorious criminals, the mugshots he has seen assembling include a Sensorite from the Sensorites, a Trileptil from the Visitation, a Slitheen, an Ice Warrior, the Gunslinger from a town called Mercy, Captain John Hart from Torchwood, Androvax and the Trickster from the Sarah Jane Adventures, and Absalom Dak from Doctor Who magazine.
The way that they included some bloke from a comic from Doctor Who magazine is one of the most
deep
cut references that I think Doctor Who post 2005 has arguably ever done.
I know. I remember watching it at the time and being like, I have no idea who this guy is, but I bet he's from Doctor Who magazine.
Like, that's so nuts. Like, obviously I know that we've had like stories that have been done from like Big Finish that have been turned into a story, as in Big Finish turned into a TV show.
Yeah.
And you've had like the Meep has come from a comic and various different things like that. But like, this is literally just a picture of the comic.
Yeah. It is a deep cut. Do you know what I think is a deep cut in this world is I think it's in Aliens of London when they assemble all of the specialists into fight the Slitheen. One of the characters there is a member of UNIT who is named in the show, I think, and was only in Doctor Who magazine in the Wilderness years. And they brought her in as a member of UNIT.
What? I didn't know that.
I know. Yeah, fun fact. You have to listen to our episode on the Slitheen episodes of Wholala to talk about that. But coming back around to the Time Heist, Josh, what did you think of this episode?
I have always loved this. Actually, do you know what? That's a big fat lie. No. On broadcast in 2014, I watched that and my little 17-year-old self went on to twitter.com and I said, what the bloody hell was that? I don't understand what I've just watched. What on earth was that? Very much in my, I study media now, I could be a critic. And I didn't get it. And then it took maybe a year later. Yeah, it was probably just about a year later because I do annual rewatches because apparently there's nothing else on television to watch. And and it wasn't until I rewatched it and had subtitles I could understand the beginning of the episode with the architect.
Please tell everyone what you call subtitles. Please.
So we had the episode on today and I said, Sam, can we put the lyrics on, please?
I love it so much. It's so cute. Oh my God.
But no, it's absolutely something that you, if you're hard of hearing like me, or you're eating a packet of crisps and there's too much rustling, there's too much overstimulation, you can't hear what the architect is saying, then hell yeah, you need subtitles because I could not tell you what was being said. No. And when you have that context at the beginning, there's a lot of information at the beginning of the episode, and if you're not paying attention at that part, you're lost for the rest of the episode.
I will back that up in this. It's another one of those Doctor episodes that has a real cold open. One of my little, I've got mainly highs. One of my little tiny lows, which I know you like, is that it opens with a shot of the time vortex, and I really love it in the context of this Doctor's era's titles. But it's so CGI. I think it's that it has those cool circles that work so well for a title sequence. But then when they try and sell it off that that's the time vortex of this era, I'm just like, this is not doing it for me. It's not.
Is there ever an explanation as to why the time vortex constantly looks different?
Creative differences, babe.
Creative differences.
I like it. I mean, it changed all the time in classics, so I completely get why it changes. I feel like in classic Who, though, it changed up until the 8th Doctor, trying to make it look more and more like cool space. They changed to a very, very different cool space for 11, and now I just think they're like, oh, let's change it every time, and I'm a bit like,
I love the idea that like the time vortex changes just because of like it just happens to be the title sequence. Does that mean that like space and the time vortex in 2012 just look like different Instagram filters?
It was great.
Funny, that random week in 2012 when you went into the time vortex, it looked like the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, do you find that? But do you know what? Funny that it had some weird like Dalek orbs. It was really bright orange,
like a dinosaur.
Oh my God! But
not like I was in the Wild West.
Oh, because in the Wild West. But I do like the cold open for this episode, and you had a really fun. What was your funny note for the very opening?
My little note was, and I quote, I like being in Clara's washing machine.
I didn't really think. Well, you were very observant because you've been in Clara's flat before.
I thought you were going to say, because you've been in Clara's washing machine.
Well, you have. You've been in Clara's flat before. And I like, there's so much stuff that I just let wash over me. But I was talking to you about it when we were watching it, and you were like, Clara has goldfish. Who looks after the goldfish? When Clara died, did Rixie look after the goldfish?
Well, this is it. I feel like when you watch, like, Rose or, like, any of Martha or any of Donna, like, you really, really have a concept of their home life.
Yeah.
And even Amy to an extent, but not as much. With Clara,
more Rory.
Yeah. With Clara, it's like, obviously, we have the beginning of The Rings of Akaten where you meet her mum and dad, and obviously her mum dies. And then her dad gets recast randomly in Time of the Doctor. That's bizarre.
But they bring the nan back.
The funniest thing is he's credited as Dad, not Dave Oswald. So I just like the idea, my little headcanon, is that he's playing a character called Dad. He's not actually Clara's dad.
His just legal name is... What if his name is like David Andre Daniels and everyone just calls him Dad and he just turns up to the Oswald Christmas dinner?
That's just his nickname, isn't it? And then his wife is Clara's stepmom is the Atmos voice, and then Clara's nan is the woman from Benidorm.
Yeah.
But like, no, that's as much as a concept of Clara's family, her like little unit is.
Yeah.
And obviously you get Clara's nan comes back in the series 8 finale, I think it is.
Yeah, it's after Danny dies.
But like, there really, really is no great explanation of Clara's little her home life, apart from obviously Danny Pink is probably the biggest one. But I completely lost my train of thought. How did I get here from a washing machine?
I don't know if anyone can follow that thought. No, I agree with you that I was saying about how we keep coming back to Clara's flat, and I like when they do that. They did it with Martha's flat, they do it with Donna's home, they did it with the Powell estate. Like, I like it when you keep coming back, because I feel like with Amy's house, we went there a couple times in series 5 and then they changed houses, and I like when you have a real tie to a companion's home life. And in this series, I like that you keep picking up Clara. I mean, we're talking about the opening of the episode, we do have to talk for a second again about her outfit, because that truly, my note just says, and pardon my French, it really just says cunty Clara outfit. She looks so good. I mean, the costume designer went off on this episode.
It's genuinely like, I think it's my favorite Clara outfit, or should I say outfit that Jenna Coleman has worn, because I also really like Oswin Oswald's outfit. I really like Under the Lake Before the Flood.
Oh, with the yellow.
Her minion outfit. Do I stutter? And like, she has a lot of strong looks, but like, I genuinely... Who was the costume designer? Let's give
them
a shout
credit
out
where
right
credit's
now.
due. Let's give credit where credit's due. Come on.
Howard Burden.
Yep. So we've just looked it up, and the costume designer for this episode was a man called Howard Burden, who was a Doctor Who costume designer from 2012 to 2014. He was also a long-time costume designer on The Red Dwarf. So he started at the beginning of Series 7, and it looks like he finished for Last Christmas. So he's responsible for a lot of Clara's outfits in this era, and he really does pop off in this series, and especially in this episode.
Howard, I could kiss you. That's it. That's my comments. Do you know what? Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
Because he put Jenna Coleman in that suit.
He did. You know what? Fair. She really looked so good. And they're very, very quickly zapped away from Clara's flat. I will say one little negative as well. And I've said it before on the podcast, I'm not a big fan of when they make the Doctor, specifically Capaldi's Doctor, act like he doesn't understand humans. Like, a big part of the Doctor's character is that they are understanding and they're compassionate and they're kind and caring. And he says to Clara at one point, "Why is your face all coloured in?" And it's like, it just doesn't, it makes the Doctor feel stupid to me. And I don't like when they write the Doctor as stupid, in and out of Capaldi's era, but specifically when he's trying to relate to humans, I just don't like it. But they zap them both away from Clara's flat, and suddenly, this is all pre-titles, by the way, they're suddenly in a room with Sabre and Cy, otherwise known as Jonathan Bailey, my husband, and they're told by the architect that they need to rob a bank. And it's all very exciting, it's all very dramatic, and the big takeaway that I had from this scene is that the memory worms came back.
Fan favourite. Memory worm.
I turned to Josh and I was like, "Are those the memory worms from?" And he just turns to me and he's like, "Would you like me to fetch the memory worms?
Would you like me to fetch the memory worms, sir?"
Yeah.
Help, I've been run over by a cab. Yeah, the actors that played the memory worm, they were out of work for a while. They had a bit of a stint on Celebrity Big Brother, but
they got brought back.
They got brought back. They were booked and busy again in 2014. But do you know what? Hashtag bring back the memory worm.
I'd be so down for them. What if the memory worms met the maggots from the Third Doctor's era?
Wow. If only.
If only. And as I mentioned, they're at the table with Jonathan Bailey. And this is another case, like Jonathan Bailey had by this point been in a lot of stuff. I'm not going to pretend. We were watching this with my friend who doesn't really watch Doctor Who. And he saw Jonathan Bailey. He's like, oh, is this the first thing Jonathan Bailey was ever in? And I had to then bring up all of the pictures of 5 children in it that Jonathan Bailey was in when he was like 13. But I completely forget that he's in Doctor Who.
He's also in Broadchurch.
Yeah. No,
He's
he
little
is.
Ollie.
Yeah, little Ollie in Broadchurch.
Little Ollie.
And he just, gorgeous man, gorgeous actor. I love him in this episode. I do feel a bit like they don't give him great dialogue. I think that Jonathan Bailey is such an incredible actor. I'm watching him in Fellow Travelers at the moment, and he has such a broad range. I don't think the writing in this episode is as good as Jonathan Bailey is capable of performing. What do you think?
I agree with you. I also don't think you can be a guest star in Doctor Who if you haven't had a lot of your potential wasted. Dare I say? There's arguably a nicer way on saying that, but you hear me out. Like, you have Ian McKellen, and you're gonna give him the voiceover of a snow machine.
Literally,
You have Gugu Marafa Raw, and to be fair, she's a recurring character of Martha's sister.
Yeah.
You have
Daniel Kaluuya.
You took the words out of my mouth, and you're going to just have him sit on a bus.
Do you know who I think they didn't underuse? Andrew Garfield. I think they really used him well.
True. Him and Kerry Mulligan, I would say, are the only two that really haven't been...
Underusing Olivia Colman, underusing Felicity Jones.
Olivia Colman. Felicity Jones, that's mad.
Yeah, there's so many crazy people that are in Doctor Who and are so underused, and I do fear that Jonathan Bailey's one of these people. I've said I don't want them to bring back Sai, but Doctor Who does this all the time. It always brings back actors.
Bring back Sai. I'll say it.
You can say it. I will say bring back Jonathan Bailey as a companion, like a completely different role. I want him back, but I don't want him as this like weird robot man who's a gay. Oh, when he was like, I'm a gamer. No offense to any gamers out there. I love a bit of The Sims too myself, but I've been known to game.
When he says I'm a gamer, do you think he was also playing the Doctor Who Top Trumps Nintendo DS game?
Yes, I do. But he was having it like directly fed into his brain. Oh my God. Sabra, I really like her character, and I love her powers that she can't touch people without turning into them. So she's constantly alone because she can't touch people. 2 thoughts on that. Number 1, when she turns herself into Clara got horny. Like, Clara's look was undeniable horn, right?
Can you blame her? She's looking at herself that suit. In that suit. I will keep going on about this every 5 minutes. In that suit.
I can't blame her. But what I was also thinking, Sabra was like, I have to be alone my whole life because I can't... I turn into the person whenever I touch them. Can you imagine, trying to like love me and just seeing yourself? I was like, she just has to get with a narcissist. Because she gets a narcissist, she'll be fine. She'll be fine.
I love your notes for that compared to my notes, which just says, Sabra mutant gene. No one can touch her. Just like that Skittles advert.
Oh my
So, do you know the one I mean? Where like,
Yes, I know what you mean.
they're like, I think it was like this woman was at like her office desk or something, and she was just trying to get her work done, and she's trying to type on her laptop, but she touches her laptop and it turns into Skittles, and then she touches her desk and that turns into Skittles. Like, that's what Sabra is going through.
I love that that's like the king and the gold story, but you just jump to the woman and the Skittles.
What does that say about my brain?
Oh my God. But it's a fun ensemble of characters. I like when Doctor Who brings in an ensemble episode, and it's fun because it's such a cold open that we don't know who any of them are. We're quite quickly introduced to both the Teller and Miss Delphox. Miss Delphox is really, really cool. She's a real like... I'm trying to think of a word other than that rude word I used earlier. She's a real, like, sassy, classy villain in Doctor Who. She really reminds me of Miss Foster, but you said something really funny when we were watching the episode.
What did I say?
You said something like, you can't be a female villain in Doctor Who without being Slay. It's not allowed.
Yeah, it's just like you never get like a un-Yarsified female villain in Doctor Who. They're all very like... Slay Mama boots the house down, like, and rightfully so. Like, I get it, but also like, I mean, that's probably arguably what makes them more memorable compared to like
some of the male villains.
I
know what you mean. That it feels a bit like sometimes with female villains in Doctor Who, there's a bit of a cookie cutter as to what that is, and that's why I think it's not necessarily a positive that this character reminds me so much of Miss Foster, because it's like they went, oh, she's a strong businesswoman bitch, and like. just kind of copied and pasted that villain archetype.
Well, do you know what? I was also going to say, like, oh, yeah, in a way that she's kind of like, yeah, she's a bit like Missy. And then it just suddenly dawned on me that, like, at one point they'd written Miss Karabraxos, or Mrs., I don't quite know. No, Ms. No, Keely Hawes, Karabraxos. They had originally written her character to be played by Michelle Gomez.
Had they actually?
Mm-hmm.
Would you know? No, you know what? I'm going to say I have a fun fact, but I'm going to save it for the end of the episode.
Oh, keep me in suspense.
I'm going to keep you all in suspense. So yeah, she comes and we meet her and the teller. The big thing that I will remember, because I didn't remember much from this episode, I mean it when I say that it felt like I was watching it almost for the first time. The big thing I do remember about this is that the prosthetic for the teller is so good. Really, really good.
So yeah, this is the thing. Like when I worked at the Doctor Who experience, like obviously we had the teller prop, and like it was massive. Like it's really, really tall, and it's really, really impressive to look at. The writer of this episode had written Curse of the Black Spot, and because so much of the siren in that episode was used, they used a lot of CGI in that used up so much of the budget that in talks for this episode they wanted to create a prosthetic alien just so that more of the budget can go on the setting, on creating the alien world, on buying All Saints costumes for the extras.
Oh my God.
Like a lot of money went into this episode, but like they didn't want to keep pumping it into like CGI for the monsters.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I do think, I always say this, that prosthetics age better than CGI. So when I look at like the Curse of the Black Spot and they had the real like green glowy like visual effects and that, I don't think that looks as good as the teller. What I will also say, I don't really know why they spent so much money on the outfits for the extras, because this is meant to be like the biggest, baddest bank in the whole of the cosmos, and everyone truly looks like they are dressed for 2014. There's one guy who, God bless his heart, if he isn't one, he certainly is dressed up one. There's cute little homosexual by the door when the teller comes in, and again he's wearing like a bow tie. It's so 2014. It's
so 2014. Tumblr, Instagram, super hulog coded. It made me want to gag a little bit.
Yeah, and not in a good way. Gag derogatory. Yeah, but like we were saying, the teller itself is really, really good. So the little TARDIS team in this episode have to break into the bank and steal something. They don't know what they're stealing. They've had their memories wiped. They're not sure why they're there or what they're doing. But they do discover these items that are meant to like atomize you or disintegrate you, and they're meant to kill you painlessly. And the teller is able to kind of like suck out your mind and sort of kill you and kind of leave you in like a gross, like sort of not quite dead state, like not like kind of alive being. So to avoid that, Sai and Sabra, they end up sacrificing themselves during the adventure. And I just wrote, I'm not a big fan of some of this episode has some really good dialogue and some really bad, and I wasn't emotional. Obviously it gets undone in the end, but when they sacrifice themselves, I liked the scene. So like when Sai sacrificed himself, I liked the scene because it has all those cameos of different aliens, but I just was so unemotional when he was doing it. Like I think we're meant to be like, oh my God, like when Linda with a Y died in Parting of the Ways, or when Jabe sacrificed herself, who, you know, was only in that one episode, I actually like felt something, whereas with these I was like, oh okay, well that's sad. Like I feel like maybe it's that we didn't get to know them enough, maybe.
That's a really, really good point. Like, I will sit and say that, you know, I want them as companions, but then at the same time, like, maybe it's because I've rewatched this episode so many times, but like, yeah, their so-called deaths didn't really scratch the surface for me, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe Sabra's like a little bit more because it was the first one, but because she'd already gone, I don't know. By the time Jonathan did it, I was a bit like, oh, I don't really care. But then, lo and behold, it's a teleporter anyway.
Well, I was going to say, maybe it's just because I've watched the episode so much, I'm like, I know what's coming. It kind of, it's like a weaker version of when Rose gets killed in Bad Wolf, because it's like, oh, she's going to get vaporized by the android. Actually, it's not death. It's just a teleporter. It's the same thing in this, isn't it?
No, it's exactly the same thing in this. And I think that, like, obviously with Rose, we had a whole series, like, getting to know you. And so it had a different effect. But I don't know. I just think maybe it was the dialogue. Maybe it's like the act. I don't know. But it just wasn't wholly emotional for me. But I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It was a teleporter. I didn't like the scene where... So I was watching the episode and there's a scene where you realise that they're not dead, it was a teleporter. And all of a sudden they're like, it's fine, Doctor. It's all good. And we've also found your TARDIS. And then here's a cure for your thing and here's a cure for your thing. And I was watching it and I was certain, because I genuinely didn't remember how this episode ended, I was certain that it was all going to be like a projection in the Doctor's head by the teller. of, you know, trying to trap him into thinking he's escaping, because it was all too like, well, everything's all right in the end. And then I was like, oh, but it's not real, right? And then like a minute passed and I was like, but it's not real, right? And then like 5 minutes passed and I was like, it's not real, right? And then I realized I was like, oh no, that actually is the fix, you know?
And they all lived happily ever after.
Yeah. I don't know. That I didn't love as much.
I think like another scene as well is when they go into that room just before Sabra dies, and like they kind of realize the whole deal with the teller is like, don't think, like you can't think about anything, you can't let it like know your thoughts and stuff. And I was like, at this point, like if you're watching Doctor Who chronologically, Stephen Moffat episodes or eras, you have Don't Blink in Blink, you have Don't Breathe in Deep Breath, and now 5 episodes later, Don't Think.
You got Don't Go in the Shadows, Silence in the Library.
Don't Go in the Shadows. God, what can I do, Stephen Moffat?
Don't Touch Your Children, The Empty Child.
Bloody hell, that took a turn.
No, I know what you mean, though. He has. I mean, I credit Stephen Moffat to this. I think that generally, and I don't know if it works so well in this episode, but generally he works really well when he takes something that is so normal and so fearless and not fear-inducing, and then makes it terrifying. And that's a real credit to Stephen Moffat's writing. But this also isn't a Stephen Moffat episode, so that's probably why it's. There's a few technical points I want to talk about before we get towards the ending, where you actually brought this up, and I really agree. I really think this episode has lovely color grading. Like it really uses color well.
This was made for the Tumblr girlies.
Oh, it really was. It really was. Well, like you said, it reuses a lot of corridors. For something that's meant to be so huge and grandiose, it's not that many sets. So their use of color in this episode really does make it feel like a larger space.
Another thing that kind of like made me giggle, but then it was also like, trauma, was obviously, like I said, the scene where they like the teller kind of locks onto Clara and then ends up like Sabra's having more thoughts. So then the teller ends up like quote unquote killing Sabra. 12 is like, don't think, like make sure that your mind goes blank. You can't think of a single thing. Like don't let it know that don't let it clock onto the fact that you're thinking. Genuinely just reminded me of like, this is what it was like when I was 14 years old, 15 years old, and I'd be watching television and there was a gay couple on telly.
Literally.
And I'm like, oh, my parents are in the room. Don't think. They can't even think.
They're gonna know. They're gonna tell. Oh my God. That's actually a really weirdly good allegory. Oh my God. No, that I really like. There's one thing I didn't like, just talking about technical stuff. There's a shot where the Dr. Sonic's like a grating, and then they like go through the grating and they end up in the room where the teller's hibernating. It's so badly edited. I wonder if they had a deleted scene. The Doctor kind of goes, oh, here, let's go through this. Zaps it with the Sonic. The whole screen kind of cuts to white, cuts back in, and suddenly they're on the other side. And I was like, this is weird editing. I don't know if you noticed this shot, but it's weird.
I love how you were like, you in your notes, you've been like, oh yeah, lovely, beautiful color grading. And I was like, I like the pretty colors. Ooh, lights.
But that's very Wholala. That's very Wholala.
Just before Sai, quote unquote, dies, when they're in the like rainbow tunnel, like whatever you want to call it, there's that line that Sai says where he's like, you can tell that you've been traveling with him for a while because you're very like good at making excuses for him. I've absolutely butchered that quote. But like, it's an excellent quote, and like it is very much like, even though 12 and Clara are still new, like 12 in series 8 is a bit of a dick.
Yeah.
And like the beauty of when you watch 12's era in chronological order from Deep Breath to Twice Upon a Time is it's just this beautiful character growth that he goes on, and like the stuff he learns from Clara, the stuff he learns from Bill, the stuff he learns from River, blah, 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 blah. And like that quote being said in episode 5 of like so early on in 12 Clara's story then obviously feeds straight into the series 9 thing of like the hybrid and how toxic the love that 12 and Clara have for each other is. I think it really sows the seeds for what series 9 leads into, and I love that.
That was really insightful. That's so true. I remember watching the episode and really liking that line and then very quickly moving on. But you're so right. Me and Alistair talk about it quite a lot when we talk about Clara. And I'm really excited to continue our Companions of the Modern Era series, Companions of the Modern Era series, where we talk about Clara in depth. Because we always say that 12 and Clara specifically have such a tumultuous relationship and it becomes very toxic, where she they kind of can't live with each other, they can't live without each other, but then she starts to feel like she can be the Doctor to a point where one day she just can't, and that's obviously in Face the Raven. And I think that even though they hadn't really finalised where they were necessarily going in their relationship, that was a real good precursor to what then came after it.
No, completely. And I think even like, I remember at the beginning of series 9 when like 12 comes out on that tank, everyone's like, oh, they've completely changed his character, blah, 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 blah. But like, they haven't. Obviously, like there's a bit of time in between Last Christmas and the beginning of series 9. Like,
they were like, they gave him a guitar.
They're like, yeah, he got like sunglasses and stuff like that. But then like, he's mellowed a little bit. Like Clara's obviously really helped him. Obviously, like he's gotten over his like existential crisis. Am I a good man? Am I a bad man? Blah blah blah.
I just think that's boring when the
am I a bad boy?
Clara, be my pal. Am I a bad boy?
But then, like, even the episode after that with like Under the Lake, like he has the cue cards and stuff like that. So he's still not like 100. Oh, someone's not a fan.
I'm not a fan. She's my carer. She cares so I don't have to.
Yeah, but it's actually, I'll tell you what, I have a question for you. Out of interest, have you ever watched, I think both 12 and 13's era specifically, if you watch...
No, never seen them.
No.
That's a joke.
Clearly. If you watch Deep Breath through to Twice Upon a Time, the character growth and like just looking at 12 as a character, like it is genuinely some of the best shit that's ever been done as a story of a Doctor, I think, ever. And also like 13's era as well. I'm not just going on a big tangent here, but like 13's era really benefits from watching it from The Woman Who Fell to Earth up until The Power of the Doctor as well. Like I think that's, yeah.
I think this is a fair point on both those Doctors. I think that 13 and 12 compared to 10 and 11, because I guess you can say 9 as well, because obviously it was one series. Their tenure, I believe, is better when you look at it as a body of work. I think when you look at the 13th Doctor's era and the 12th Doctor's era, they are some of the best Doctor Who that's ever been when you look at it as a whole. Whereas with 10 and 11, I think you can quite easily pick out certain episodes and be like, oh, that's a great one. That's a really good one. That's a great story. And then, yes, it's a good body of work overall, but I think maybe even 11 is quite a messy body of work. When you look at it overall, I think it has less of a structure, maybe.
It's like if you can say that like 9, 10 and 11, if they were albums, it's like, oh, I really love that single, I really love that song, I really love that specific one from the album. And then 12's era and 13's era, it's just like they're beautiful albums.
Yeah, it's a real piece. You listen together. That's a really good, not us getting deep on the pod.
2 analogies in a row that made sense.
I know.
Wow, what am I on?
I'm not sure I understand.
Why does that always come on at the worst possible point? I swear to God.
Oh my God. So to quickly talk about the ending, they go into the vault and they meet Madame Karabraxos, who is obviously the director of the whole bank. And we find out that everyone else who has been working in the different branches of the bank is a clone of her. And she's very quick, because they kind of allude the whole episode to, oh, you don't want to get fired. It's not good to get fired. And then we find out that being fired is being incinerated. And I was a bit like, oh, it's a bit intense. But you said something really funny about like, well, they're fired. Because the Doctor's like, oh, you know, she hates her clones. She burns her clones. And you're like, if I met my clone, I'd hate him too.
It's true. It's true. I have always said, if I was to meet me from 2 years ago, I'd push him down a flight of stairs.
I don't think that's true.
And if I was to meet my clone and my clone was working for me, I'd probably find him insufferable.
No, I think that's valid on my end as well. I think I probably would too. I can only deal with so much of me, and I am me. But it's really the ending's really interesting, I think. I like that the Doctor has to be sort of like, what's the word you'd use by being like mind sucked by the teller? Like what would you he'd been told. The Doctor's like, you know, do me. Like the Doctor basically tells the teller that he has to like have access to his mind because the Doctor needs to revive his memories. And then when he does revive his memories, we find out that he was the architect the whole time, with the whole voice measure like, I am the architect. there's a moment where he says, "I'm understanding," and Clara's like, "What are you understanding?" He goes, "I'm not sure yet." And there's also a really funny line when he's being like mind sucked, and he says, "What do you think of the new look? I was going for minimalism, but I think I ended up with magician," which I was like, "True, bestie."
Shut up.
Oh my god, yeah, that the shutty.
Shut up.
I thought it was going to turn into that bit from the Confrontation show where they're like, "Shut up, just shut up, shut up, shut up, just shut up, shut up." But I somehow, like I said, I didn't really remember this episode, but I knew in the back of my mind, I was like, I think the Doctor's going to be the archetype, and you were like, shush, just watch.
I was like, especially as there was people in the room that hadn't watched it, I was like,
I'm not telling you.
Stop!
You're going to ruin it.
You're going to ruin the story.
No, but it's a very sweet ending where we then find out that the teller has a mate who was kept captive, and that Madame Karabraxos had the one regret that she left them locked up and that the species died out. So the Doctor went back to fix this, and they released them onto this uninhabited planet to sort of repopulate. And it's a very sweet ending, very lovely. But I think maybe, especially because it's in comparison to the practical costumes, I was just like, wow, that planet's CG.
I just love the idea that, like, and for those who are listening who live in Cardiff, you'll get this. I just love the idea of two people in them costumes randomly just strolling around Butte Park in Cardiff city centre, like mere meters away from Cardiff Castle, just walking around them, and then they're like, we'll edit it in, it will look like a planet.
Literally, I can just imagine everyone watching there like, oh, it's Doctor.
There's a Greg's round the corner. Like.
There's a really funny moment when the Doctor's talking, and my partner's from Barbados, so he sometimes gets a bit muddled with regional accents in the UK, and he went, is he Welsh? And then Josh just turned and went, is the teller Welsh? And then I suddenly went, and this whole thing was like, bloody hell, I've got me working in this bank, I don't even get time off. I don't even get sick pay. What you talking about? Like, oh my God, that was so funny to me.
It's the idea of a Welsh teller. Well, that might be. They could have repopulated. They could have...
Bank tellers. There are people who work in banks called tellers, and they're bank tellers.
What the bloody hell is a bank teller?
They're the people who work at the machines. They're bank tellers. That's, oh my God, do you reckon that's intentional?
Surely. Hold on.
So there are people who work in the bank called tellers, and they work at a bank. And
What?
Oh my God, he's just Googling it and finding this out.
Wikipedia for bank teller. A bank teller, also abbreviated to simply teller, is an employee of a bank whose responsibilities include handling of customer cash and negotiable instruments. In some places, this employee is known as a cashier or a customer representative. Tellers also deal with routine customer service at branch. Tellers also melt customers' brains and turn them into soup.
Oh, there you go. Those aren't tears, Clara, that's soup.
That's mad. Honestly, this is probably one of my favorite things about Doctor Who, is that, like, you can know every single possible piece of information and fun facts, and, like, you've seen this episode a million times, and then you just chat with someone else and you're like,
there's so much more.
Bank tellers are a thing. Like,
exactly.
I
love this show. There you go. Closing this episode out, I noted that they keep reusing that one shot of the TARDIS flying away. They use it 4 times in about a minute, and I was like, this is a bit much. But the funniest thing when we were rewatching it is we had a Chinese takeaway for dinner, and Josh just goes, at the end, all the TARDIS team are inside the TARDIS eating Chinese takeaway, and they're like, wait a minute, they're having Chinese, and we had Chinese.
We did. I mean, they were eating some sort of noodles from, like, a pot or something.
It's a very, like, American Chinese, like Chinese takeout. That's what it looked like. Yeah.
So they were eating an American Chinese with, like, noodles and stuff like that. And I had chicken. No, I didn't. I didn't have chicken. I had hoisin duck and sauce and pancakes, which they didn't eat on the TARDIS.
No, maybe one day.
Maybe one day.
Well, Josh, what did you think of this episode overall?
So I don't think it's the best thing since sliced bread. However, I really, really do have a soft spot for this episode. Mm-hmm. I think it's just lots of little things. I think it's a fun episode. I think I agree with people on Twitter who were saying, like, it very much feels like the episode of the week formula that they did with Series 7.
Mm-hmm.
I had a great time with it. I think the characters are fun. I think Karabraxos is fun. I think Sai and Sabre are fun. I think the teller is an interesting concept. Yeah, I had a good time with it. It's one of my favourites in Series 8.
I'm glad. I think that's a really fair description. Well, I remember watching it at the time and just, I think I was a bit underwhelmed, but I think that was me generally with the series. And having rewatched it and had some time, I don't necessarily think that now. I think it's got a lot of fun in it. It's not a perfect story, and there's definitely moments that bring it down, but I think it's really fun having you dropped in the middle of an adventure. You're working things out with the Doctor and the companion. I like that it's like a bank heist. I always say this, and I said this when we were talking about Gents of the Daleks last week. I like when Doctor Who doesn't just feel like a time travel show where different episodes feel like different themes, and this feels like a bank heist movie. And I like when Doctor Who does that. It leans into different sort of tones and genres, and I think this does it successfully, and I think it's a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, you're a very special guest in a very special podcast, and that means it's time for a very special game.
Ooh.
Are you ready to play a little game of Camp or Damp?
Yes.
I always want to sing the theme song, and then I'm like, no, it's playing.
Sing it.
So for anyone who hasn't listened to an episode of Wholala before, we go through some camp moments. So for anyone who hasn't listened to an episode of Wholala before, we go through some moments of the episode we've just discussed, and we discuss whether they're camp or whether they're damp. Are you ready?
I was born ready for this.
Clara's Luke, camp or damp?
Oh, in no way could I ever say that Clara's look was damp. It is camp to the highest degree.
Mm-hmm.
Like 10 years later, we're still shaking.
We really are. My partner was watching with us, and he was like, oh my God. And we were like, what? He was like, she's wearing a tie. I thought it was a harness. And I was like, fair. I want to know where she was going. She was going on a date. Where were you going on a date?
She was going on a date with bloody maths teacher Daniel Pink. Daniel Pink does not deserve Clara, full stop.
I bet you he turned up from what he wore to work.
Yeah, I bet he was wearing like jogging bottoms and like
boots with the fur.
Boots with the fur. Not Danny Pink wearing that.
Oh. Any scene with Jonathan Bailey, camp or damp?
Oh, you're so right for this. Camp. I think I was a bit in love with him.
I think I still am.
I think, yeah, rightfully so. I think, you know, when you watch someone and like it's in like something, I don't want to say Broadchurch's niche, but like in my head, he's always little Ollie, that dickhead journalist. Like even in this, I'm like,
that's Ollie.
No matter how big he'll get, like everyone's like, oh my God, Bridgerton and like fellow travellers. And I'm like, no, he's little Ollie from Broadchurch.
I think of him from 5 Children in It from like 2006. Oh my God.
No, that's absolutely camp.
Yeah.
I love him in this. I love Sabre. I love Sai. I think, yeah, I've said it a dozen times, but I'm like,
bring him back.
Should have been a companion.
Should have been. And finally, memory worms. Camp or damp?
Oh, I feel like we're gonna have to go for the hat trick here. I feel like I'm gonna have to go for camp. I am obsessed with memory worms. I think the idea of them from the Snowmen, funny enough, bring them back randomly 2 years later.
Is this the last time they bring them back?
Yeah, they've only had two episodes in it. I think out of the two, what's your favourite memory worm appearance?
It's got to be the Snowman. It's got to be, shall I fetch the memory worms? It's so good.
Oh, God.
Well, I've got a couple of fun facts for you as well, Josh, off the back of this episode.
Go.
Speaking about the premise for the episode, director Douglas McKinnon said, quote, "We wanted to do a heist movie for Doctor Who. I've watched virtually every heist movie there's ever been, and it incorporates things into it, but because it's Doctor Who, time travel has to be involved." It's not much of a fun fact. Just said he wanted to be a time heist movie, and it was.
I think they did a very good job with it.
And one thing that I thought was really interesting is that this episode was written before Peter Capaldi had been cast as the Doctor.
I struggle to believe that. I mean, I do believe that, but I can't. Like with episodes in Series 8, like Robot of Sherwood specifically, I'm like, that is a weekly rehashed Series 7 Part 2 episode of Matt Smith. Like this is the 11th Doctor with a few grumpy moments added in for the 12th Doctor. This episode, I feel like I cannot imagine Matt Smith doing this. I can't imagine like Jodie Whittaker doing this. I can't imagine like it
has to be Peter Capaldi.
It really, really feels like such a Capaldi episode, and I can't imagine any other Doctor being like the architect as well. Like that's an interesting fact. I like that.
There you go, I'm glad.
This is a personal fun fact. This has got nothing to do with, this will never end up on some TARDIS wiki page or anything like that. But when I was working at the Doctor Who Experience, I was there when it closed, And for a couple of weeks after it shut its doors to the customers, I had the responsibility of taking the costumes and props and stuff like that down and cataloguing it and sending it back to production. And me and my colleagues would like occasionally have like some tiny little gadget or like tiny little piece of machinery. And like, I mean, we're all massive Doctor Who nerds that worked there. So like, we were very, very good and like very, very like, oh, that's from that one, or that's from that one. Like all of us knew something.
Yeah.
But then every now and then you just get the most obscure looking bit of technology and go, what on earth is this? Where's this come from? And then we ended up just creating this catchphrase of just going, because we knew how much money had been spent on this episode, we just went, if in doubt, Time Heist.
It's probably true for all the little gadgets and gizmos in this episode.
I just love the idea of production just like opening up all of these things and just being like, we did not spend this much money on Time Heist. Why has Time Heist got so many things? Like, where's this prop from? Oh, they put it in the Series 8-bit again.
They open it up, it's from Gridlock. Oh, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Josh. It's been so much fun. I'm so glad to have done this one with you.
Oh, no, thank you. I'm very, very privileged to be on. Thank you for having me.
Well, tell everyone where they can find you, if you want them to find you, that is.
Oh, my goodness. So you can find my Twitter on Twitter/X at the Whippersnapper, but it's written with A's. I wouldn't even know how to say this.
THEWHIPPASNAPPA.
Yep, the Whippersnapper. Couldn't have picked an easier handle for myself. That's about it.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Go follow him there.
Yeah, you'll just find some like completely unhinged, off-the-wall Doctor Who thoughts and opinions there every now and then.
I love it. Honestly, as someone who follows your Twitter and has been following for a while, I can vouch for you. It's a very fun Twitter to be following. I'm going to hire you to do Wholala's Twitter soon.
You will see the nichest Doctor Who things. You will see my random thoughts and feelings on EastEnders. Every couple of weeks asking for Roxy and Ronnie to be brought back from the dead. And not a lot else.
Fun and merriment.
Yeah.
There's a couple goblin things in there too.
Goblins, Lucasade.
And sometimes the meep.
Sometimes the meat.
And you can always find us on our social media for Wholala at WholalaPod on all platforms. We're talking Twitter/X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads. I always want to say Vine. We're not at Vine. Find something around for a while.
I know we've gone back in time to 2014. But
I know. It does feel like that. Maybe that's what it is. And you can always listen to old episodes of the podcast again on our YouTube channel, which is also WholalaPod. And please, if you have the time, make sure you do leave us a review. We are on all of the podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Podcasts. I think we're still on Google. I think Google Podcasts is still a thing. Give us a shout if you're listening to Google Podcasts. Please do leave us a 5-star review if possible. You can tell us how much you like the show. You can donate money to our coffee, co/FI if you want. We're trying to raise $4,000 for a Dalek. But thank you so much as always for listening. Next week, Alistair will be back on the podcast and we will be talking about the underrated episodes of Doctor Who. So thank you so much again, Josh, for joining us, and I will see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.